as many of you know, I'm going to try to do something a little bit new. I'm going to try to make it so that the stream's more reachable, more approachable. I'm going to try to make some content that really fits and works with YouTube, so that I can cut these up and post them to my YouTube clips, and we'll see how that works. So give me your feedback. Let me know how you're liking it or not liking it, and I'll try to make it better as we go. There's a few other changes, not quite ready to announce. It's more about how I make YouTube videos. I've been doing a ton of research and reading on those, and so there will be changes. I basically have two different types of YouTube video content, and I'm going to be doing some stuff there. So anyways, stay tuned for that. All right, let's talk about who broke the internet. Now, every once in a while, the internet has a hiccup, and usually it's one of the major service providers going down, and that takes out, a chunk of internet. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you look at something like this, we generally have we're going to say we have three big providers. I know that Oracle is getting a little upset about this, but we have three major providers. And there are some people that are redundant. So they'll sit in these, this is AWS, this is Azure, and this is GCP. So let's do like AWS. All right. So, you might run in both. These people would be redundant, in AWS and GCP, and they might be able to survive a minor AWS outage. But these people here would be unable to survive a AWS outage because they're fully on AWS. Ha! All right. So now when I say minor about this right here, what a lot of people don't talk about is you don't always implement everything. Like, you have major failovers for important things, but if an entire cloud goes down and your primary thing is in AWS, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to survive unless you've done it really, really well, which is actually quite difficult to do. We can get into how difficult it can be to do this. What happens is when one of these big providers go down, whether it's Google, whether it's Azure, AWS, the chunk of internet powered by that provider goes dark. That's generally how it works. The chunk of the internet powered by AWS, Google, or Azure goes away. And you're only able to access then the chunks that are made by the other two. AWS is actually the largest one, but Azure is actually catching up on that. So both of them have in the 20% of the internet. And nobody uses Google for good reason. So what happened? Google went down. You don't expect other cloud providers to be affected by it. Google going down shouldn't have affected anybody but Google, right? That's what you would think. But unfortunately, there was a cheeky blog release that was released in an inopportune time. So we were going to talk about we shipped finalization registry in Workers, why you should never use it. And the reason you should never use it is because it's probably backed by Workers KV. And if it was backed by Workers KV, which a lot of their products are, it went down, and it went down hard. So there was 3 hours of outage. And we're going to track back why Cloudflare had a problem. Now, a lot of you probably know by now, I thought about making this when there was less data available, but a lot of you know by now that Cloudflare actually has a part of their architecture actually uses a third party. This is generally considered a no-no for a cloud provider. If you're a cloud provider, you are providing what these people are providing. You don't leverage another provider. So basically what we have, if we're looking at it over here, has a dependency on this Google bubble. Now, we'll get into why I think that's I was actually really surprised by this. I was super surprised by the fact that Cloudflare would depend on Google at all, and have a dependency. And we'll get to what I've been able to understand of the problem so far. But that's the fact of the matter. There is a thing that Google makes, and I'll get into what I think that is. I've been trying to suss some of this stuff out for you all, but we'll get into it. So Cloudflare has a dependency on Google. At least that's what I can tell. There has been very little communications from Google, and Cloudflare did a really good job, and that's what we're gonna jump into. So Cloudflare had a service outage. Let's talk about the service outage here, and then we're gonna talk about what they did really well, and what I think is so worth talking about, because you have a ton of people out there talking about this. So if you want to know more about this, we will talk about it here. But you have a lot of people talking about this. Cloudflare had a dependency on Google. Okay, great. Let's read their report. And mind you, this report was on the same day of the outage. And I want to say this was like an hour after the outage that all of this was written up. Okay, so fantastic time-wise, but let's get into it. Cloudflare service outage, June 12th, 2025. On June 12th, 2025, Cloudflare suffered a significant service outage that affected a large set of critical services. For the most part, everything was down. There was a few things, I think, like their API that survived, but their API to what? Including Workers KV, Warp, Access, Gateway, Image, Stream, Workers AI, Turnstile, Challenges, AutoRag, Zara. I didn't even know this. Zaraz. I've never heard this service. I've never looked at it. Okay, it probably does something really cool since I didn't know it existed. And parts of the Cloudflare dashboard. The outage lasted 2 hours, 28 minutes. It was really closer to 3 hours, and globally impacted all Cloudflare customers using the affected services. The cause of this outage was due to a failure in the underlying storage infrastructure used by the Worker KV service. Now, if you're not familiar with the Worker KV service, it's a key value store. You can do a lot with key value stores. Like, yeah, you can do a lot with key value stores. So it's very useful, which means a lot of services use it, which is a critical dependency for many Cloudflare products and relied on for configuration, authentication, and asset delivery across the affected services. Part of this infrastructure is backed by a third-party cloud provider, which experienced an outage today and directly impacted the availability of our KV service. So there's two very interesting things that is super awesome here. One of these things was originally championed by, I want to say it was AWS. And there's probably a smaller thing, but AWS is the person that scaled this concept to a massive size. And that's the fact that AWS, or Cloudflare, for that matter, is built on top of Cloudflare. So why I say AWS is they were very famously, Jeff Bezos was like, all right, everything that you build is a service. Everything that you build is a service that can be consumed internally or externally. So Cloudflare obviously does this. We've actually pointed that out in other things that they do, but this is saying it again. The reason all their other services went down was because they were depending on their own services. And what does this do? And why is this a big deal? Well, this is a big deal because this is why their services are so. Do you know why Google? We make fun of Google, but do you know what one of the big reasons people don't like Google? It's not the services they even use themselves. If you're talking about, do they use Kubernetes? Well, no, they don't use Kubernetes, and especially not the Kubernetes GCP gives you. They actually use a different thing. They don't use the things that they give you. Google itself is built off of something else. And to prove that even further, do you know what didn't go down during all of this? Google.com does not use GCP. That's pretty rough. Okay, let's keep going. Anyways, I think that's actually a really good point because it makes Cloudflare better, more reliable. Cloudflare uses Cloudflare. One, that's a vote of confidence. When a company doesn't use their own stuff, that's their own vote of inconfidence. When you use it yourself, you get to know the ins and outs of it. You know ways to improve it. You know ways to that you'd like it to work in the future. Your PMs have an easier time. You're one of the customers. And so you can make the base Cloudflare better. So this is awesome. It's something that's really important. It's something that AWS and Cloudflare do, and I think I don't know so much on Azure. I will see if I can't figure that out with the people that I know that work there. My guess is that some of the services are built that way. It's a pretty popular way. Dog fooding is what people call it a lot of the time, and it's what Google doesn't do. Oh, you know what? I had meant to turn the music off while we were doing this. All right, there was a there was a bit of information here in this paragraph that we really need to touch on. Part of this infrastructure is backed by a third-party cloud provider, which experienced an outage today and directly impacted the availability of our KV service. Why is this important? This right here is really, really important. When you use Cloudflare, this is you. You know, we're gonna draw you. I'm an artist. When you leverage Cloudflare, you are buying Cloudflare. You are buying their services, their reliability, their promise. Now, we always say this, but how we implement things, how engineers do this, how they build this is really up to them. If they want to leverage GCP, which I don't think they will in the future, but if they want to, you don't and shouldn't care, right? If Cloudflare says that we're going to promise you 99.9999% uptime, so this is their promise here, 99% uptime. What is this? This is 6 nines. They're wanting to say 6 nines. I don't know what Cloudflare says that they're going to do. But if they want to say that they have 6 nines and give that to you, you don't care how they do that. They could do that by leveraging multiple clouds. They could do it on their own hardware. And honestly, we do this all the time. Whether it is putting a database as a service that you give people and that they can leverage in the cloud, whether this is your, even Craigslist, when people go to craigslist.com, they're going to something that is backed somewhere. It's running on some provider. Now, if Craigslist goes down, it's probably one of these clouds, right? Sure, it probably is. But you don't really care. That's an implementation detail. And what I love about this is they did not say who went down. In fact, it was a big question. Why did Cloudflare go down? Now, if we're talking about who went down, let's show you this. Now, I want to point out, this is the bump we're talking about. This is the bump we're talking about. Not this bump. This was their own problem. Not this bump. We're talking about this bump here. Now, one of the things that we need to point out is that Google didn't go down. This was GCP, which this was being reported on Google, but it wasn't actually google.com that survived. As you can see, this is like a very sharp peak and then comes back down, where the real outage was a while. The real outage took a little while. So these are the things that went down. What I do want to talk about is the Azure and AWS one, because I don't actually think these two went down. I think something else unrelated was. What made it difficult in all of this was that Twitch also went down. So I don't have Twitch here. Twitch did go down, but I believe that Twitch was actually their own doing. It just coincided with the rest of the internet going down. Twitch is on AWS though, but I don't know of another AWS site that actually had problems, or Azure. But I do believe that there was some stuff going wonky with AWS. I'm just not sure exactly its full thing. So that's like the full thing. Anyways, in all of that, they didn't say. Actually, it required third parties that actually got in touch from representatives. So what's causing the service outage? Cloudflare status page. We're continuing to do this. What you can see here is, yeah, an outage of a third party service, which a key dependency. What we have to come to it is this right here is a previous update on the page said we have identified the root cause and applied appropriate mitigation. Our infrastructure has recovered in all regions. Google Cloud products that rely on the affected infrastructure are seeing recovery in multiple locations. If we go look, I guess there are representatives. So Google Cloud, none of the representatives talk to me. I would love to talk to you guys. A Cloudflare representative, the cause of the massive outage of the disruption of the service was that it was uh, Google. And that's what brought all of this down. Let's look at so this is the down detector. AWS said that their service never went down. What did I oh, here we go. So this was the service outage for here. So you can see here, and this is what they wrote up. They actually wrote up less than Cloudflare did, and they were more impacted. So you can see Google Clouds. Google Cloud hasn't released why they went down yet. So we are waiting on that. So let's finish this. We're deeply sorry for the outage. It's our failure on our part, and while the approximate cause or trigger for this outage was a third-party vendor failure, we're ultimately responsible for our chosen dependency and how we chose to architect around them. This is the big thing that everybody should be talking about. This is absolutely true. When you design your application, you can design it to run on GCP, Azure, AWS. You can design it to run on all three of them. You can be in this little corner right here and design them to be on all three of them. You could say to provide maximum, maximum whatever we're doing, you got to put a data center on the moon. So you could need to put your data center here on the moon. This is the moon. The moon. I can't spell moon, apparently. And so you could have to put your on the moon so that it could survive any one of these going down. Now, obviously, this is a little ridiculous because this would cost an astronomical amount. And that's the decision that you're making every single time that you do this. I'm sure that this is why when people say, oh, make it HA, make it highly available, and it doesn't mean a whole lot because what are you actually trying to survive? A better question is, or a better statement is, I want to be able to survive a region outage. I want to be able to survive a zone outage. I want to be able to survive a provider outage. Those are better statements other than highly available. Highly available is super specific and doesn't actually mean a whole lot. How highly available do you want your application? And when you design your application with your PMs, your product, the company, you have to make the decision of how highly available. The cost looks like this. This is the cost of building a highly available application. You have the dollar amount here. That is not a very straight line. Let me do this one more time really quickly. I should have been. And then you could basically be like all the cloud providers. And basically the cost for doing this right here is really, really easy, much more difficult. Surviving just a single cloud provider, being multi-cloud, is astronomically expensive. So this is supporting the same application just making it so that you can survive any one of these, it just gets that's not exactly how I meant that graphic go. It just gets astronomical. It gets really, really, really expensive. And the cloud providers don't even do this. Azure can't survive an Azure cloud provider outage. They just can't do it. It's Google's about the only person that can do it. So when you're building your application, you're actually asking yourself what the level, how much do you need to spend to survive any one of these things? It's actually a really important question. If you want to say that you should be able to survive your auth provider going down, you have to have a backup auth provider uh, going, whether that's a backup from your own or for you. If you want to be able to access your infrastructure while your whoever provides your company's authentication goes down, if you want to say that your data layer can go down and you want to be able to survive that, you've got to have a hot backup ready with a way to fail over. So that means you also need to be able to detect as soon as it goes down so that you can fail over. So this is all about how much engineering work you want to go into it. And that is what they did. They said, hey, look, GCP is easy. We're going to leverage GCP and build all of this critical infrastructure on top of it. We all make that decision, and that's what they did. What the really big thing here is they didn't say GCP went down. That's it. They could have been like, GCP's down. What do you expect out of us? Well, a lot of us expect our cloud providers to not worry about other cloud providers. None of us expected, and this is why this is a big deal. None of us expected uh, Cloudflare to have a problem because GCP was having a problem. Nobody would expect Azure to have an issue if GCP went down. Nobody would expect AWS to have a problem if GCP went down, right? So that was the big deal is Cloudflare has positioned itself as a cloud provider. Originally, they really just positioned themselves as a way to handle if you were getting DDoSed, they would save you from getting DDoS. So if you went over to their website and your website was here and it was currently getting DDoSed by just a ton of people, you could go to Cloudflare's website and they had a button that said under attack question mark, and you could literally put Cloudflare in front of them and handle the DDoS. That's like what their bread and butter. At this point in their life, I don't think people would have expected them to not have a dependency on a cloud. They weren't really positioning themselves as a cloud. But if you look at all of the services that they listed here, workers, KV, images, stream, workers, AI, turnstile, uh, these possibly. But if you're looking at like their R2 data storage and all of those types of things, they obviously are positioning themselves as a cloud. So you would not expect them to have a dependency on another cloud. But it's a decision they made. It probably saved them time and money to make that decision, assuming that Google could actually keep their storage online. And they went with it. And that's awesome. This was not a result of attack or other security event. No data has been lost as a result of the incident. Cloudflare Magic Transit and Magic WAN, DNS, Cache, Proxy, WAF, and related services were not directly impacted by this incident. This right here means that it didn't use KV service. That's all it means. As a rule, Cloudflare designs and builds our services on our own platform building blocks, and as such, many of Cloudflare products are built to rely on Workers KV service. The following table details the impacted services, including the user-facing impacted operation failures and increases in error rates observed. So all of these things went down. We can go over them. There's other people that covered this better. What I really wanted to talk about was just how they handled it. They took full responsibility. Why? Because they designed it that way. It was their fault that they went down. People would expect them to not go down in the case of a GCP failure. But I also wanted to point out that this was fine and good. Like People do this. It's okay. But when it happens, you can't just say, it's not our fault, it's Google's. Well, you picked Google, you engineered it to work with Google services, and you made the decision not to leverage AWS. So it is your fault in the end. That's just how it is. You engineered it in such a way where it would fail if GCP was down. This is a clear engineering design and a decision. It's a business decision, really, but it's a clear business decision because guess what? It's not really feasible for a lot of small teams to survive a failure of any one cloud. But it is a decision, and you got to own it. When it happens, you own it. It's okay to say, "Oh yeah, it was caused by a underlying third-party failure." People are going to understand. Cloudflare, it's a bigger deal because, well, while that's true, they probably shouldn't have that dependency. You don't expect them to have that dependency on a third party. I thought it was really cool. I thought that they handled it really well. Their write up was really good as it was, and that was written the same day. They said that they're going to follow up later, so I hope I will be watching for that. If it's worth going over, we'll go over that. But they did a then walkthrough. So a background worker KV was called a coreless service, which means it should have no single point of failure as the service runs independent of each location. This is a cool thing to achieve. It's very difficult to actually achieve. However, workers KV today relies on a central data store to provide the source of truth for data. This is actually really interesting to me. The fact that they use GCP to build workers KV. Like this is interesting. Another interesting thing that they say here is worker KV removed a storage provider as we work to re-architect KV's backend, including migrating it to Cloudflare R2. I guess this means that Cloudflare R2 doesn't use worker KV because if it did, that would have a circular dependency, and I don't. That would work very well. So my guess is that Cloudflare R2, they're really cheap block cloud storage. Doesn't use worker KV, or the reason, and this is maybe my guess, is the reason that they don't use Cloudflare R2 is because it uses worker KV. And maybe the thing that they're doing is getting Cloudflare R2 to not use worker KV so that it's not a circular dependency. You could technically have these two services have a circular dependency, like that's actually possible. One of the ways that we've done this in the past is with Kubernetes. This didn't turn out to work very well, but it was Kubernetes in Kubernetes. And basically, you would have the Kubernetes control plane, so all the things that are part of the Kubernetes control plane hosted in Kubernetes. So if this was Kubernetes, it would actually be hosted in Kubernetes. And these would be nodes, just regular nodes. Now we kind of do a hybrid of this with KubeADM right now, but basically all of the control plane nodes would be run in Kubernetes, but they're the thing that builds Kubernetes, right? This is what the control plane nodes are, Kubernetes, right? So it's basically running itself. Now, the problem with this is failure becomes really painful because if the control plane fails, it doesn't recover without human intervention because the control plane is down, but there's nothing to run the control plane in because the control plane is the thing that runs itself. And so you have this thing that when it falls flat on its face and it hurts. So you can actually do this basically where these two things depend on each other. The failure mode for that, I would just warn Cloudflare, learn from my mistakes, learn from others' mistakes. Generally, it's a bit painful. Now, Kubernetes to get around this does their static pods, which kind of do the same thing, but it's not really the same thing. It's not actually, it runs in Kubernetes, but it's not actually running in Kubernetes. It's using static pod manifests, which just get run. It's a little bit different. This was really cool that they shared all of the impact data here. Obviously, they have a detailed timeline of when they were doing stuff and in-flight activities. Like I said, they are going to do a follow-up. At least that's what they said. I will be watching for it. What do you think? What do you think the biggest takeaway is? Do you architect your applications to survive a single cloud? It's difficult, isn't it? Anyways, that's it. That's it for this, at least. Now, yeah, I'm not very good at these. I'm gonna have to work at. I'm gonna have to work at this a little bit. My whole point was they took ownership for their design, which was awesome. I think they deserve kudos for that, and I think we should learn from that. Too often, as engineers, we want to say AWS is down, and maybe that's all we can do at the time. Maybe at that point, yeah, all we can do is AWS is down. We're sorry. But at the end of the day, our businesses chose to be solely using AWS. That was a business decision.